Thank you for listening to Games by Design, our podcast where we dive into the vast subjective world of video games as we examine one of our favorite pastimes through the lens of game design. Now, whether through technology, philosophy, or just our personal experience, we break down these various elements and try to extract some of the answers as to what makes an effective gaming experience. I'm your host again today, Aaron Bone, and if you're joining us for the first time, thanks for listening. With me, as always, are my co-hosts and compatriots, Zach and Nick Dunlap.
Hey.
Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, good
now,
to be here.
normally we switch out hosts every week. We try to have a rotation. Each can bring something new to the table. But since we started our rotation with our special episode where we dive into one game in particular, it just so ended up that you got me 2 times in a row for these podcasts. So sorry about that, but we'll be back to a regular rotation now.
Sweet.
But just to give you a rundown of how this show goes. So each week, the 3 of us take turns discussing something about video games, whether it's an experience we had that week and something we played, or just this topic about game design that we want to dive more in-depth into. We bring that up to each other, we discuss, we have a good time. This is not a news podcast, this is not a review podcast, this is not a tech podcast. And we play what we want, when we want, and we leave all that news, numbered scores, succinct journalism stuff to the myriad of other outlets in the podcast space. So if you want to hear about the PS5 or the Xbox Series X and how their performance differ, an in-depth dive into Cyberpunk, that's not our podcast. We just talk about what we want. It's kind of selfish, but if you want to come along for the ride, it should be fun. So our first segment of the show, we're going to talk about some experiences we had with gaming this week. A moment or two in a game that impacted us either in a positive or negative way, and something we want to share. So Zach, what is a moment you've had this week?
So I was gonna talk about. I've been playing A Night in the Woods, which I think is fantastic, and you'll hear about again at the end of this podcast. But it's wonderful. It's this cute little story about this girl who comes home from college and is living in the. It's kind of like. I just find it incredibly relatable. It's great, and my experience from it this week is that there's kind of like this daily grind kind of a thing that you go through. Not really much of a grind because it's more like a daily drift. You're drifting through your life trying to figure out what it is you want to be doing and stuff like that. That's the story. That's what the story is about. But what's really, really cool about it is that it feels like, I was playing it and I was thinking in another game, this pace, this slow, like aimless pace would be really frustrating to me because I want to have some goal or destination that I'm working towards. But since this one's just about that, basically, like not having a direction in life, then it was weird that the mechanics and the way the gameplay felt so natural there, and it didn't bother me at all, and I just found it like really. I don't know, cathartic, peaceful. I don't know. It was cool. It was neat. I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. And what type of a game is that?
Good question.
Yes, yeah. It's not like a. I don't know. It's like this 2D walk around town daily life simulator.
Slice of life kind of a.
Yeah, slice of life kind of a thing. You wake up in the morning, you go around, you talk to your friends. It's really narrative heavy. Like it's got a script that you're basically following the whole way through, and there's not a ton of like agency to how the game plays out, but like it's just a cute little story narrative thing with limited mechanical elements.
Very cool. And that's a Night in the Woods, you said?
Night in the Woods, yeah. yeah, it's fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like one to check out. Is that one on Game Pass?
Oh,
Yeah, that's where I grabbed it from.
Ah,
Mhm.
very cool.
Actually, it was Elise grabbed it first, and I said, "Hey, that looks like a lot of fun. I'm gonna have to do that too."
I jumped on that bandwagon as well. Really enjoying it.
Very cool. Well, Nick, what's your experience?
Yeah. So I was playing Elite Dangerous this week. I decided to try that one out, which is a game about flying around in spaceships.
Oh, that's a free Epic game, isn't it?
Yep. I've been thinking about getting it for a while, and then it popped up on Epic, and I went, "Hey, great! I don't have to buy it." So I was playing through the tutorial, and I kind of got started into the game. My experience, I suppose, my realization was actually a bit of frustration, and that was like there was a lot of really fun starship interactions, but I realized I wasn't really interested in playing as a spaceship. I was interested as playing as a pilot.
Mhm.
And you never leave the spaceship in this game. And so for me, it was kind of a realization of like, oh, I feel like I want to feel like a person. And since I never even like leave this spaceship, like I never get out for anything, you're basically, you're locked in the cockpit throughout everything you do. Every time you land somewhere, you're just going through menus and stuff. And so my experience was the realization of, I don't actually love this. I like the idea of flying through space, but I'd prefer to feel like a person flying through space. And I don't feel like a person because I never leave my spaceship. I just feel like a spaceship. So that was my realization, is that like it's important to me, or at least for that experience. It was I was more interested in being a person than a spaceship, which is not well said. But I'm
Didn't
just
want
going
to
to leave it
roleplay
at
as
that
a
because I'm not
spaceship.
sure.
Huh?
Sorry, what?
I said you didn't want to roleplay as a spaceship.
No, I wanted to role play as a pilot, and I never left the spaceship, so I didn't feel like a pilot. So that's it. I'm having a hard time.
No.
Can't have much of a character
I
arc
mean-
when you're just a spaceship.
when you're just a spaceship.
What's your backstory, Mr. Spaceship?
No, that is kind of a trope in some vehicle-based games that, you're driving around or you're flying around. I'm thinking of something like Burnout Paradise, where you're basically just a sentient
Mhm.
car that can change
Yeah.
the
And then
car.
that's actually popped up into my brain as well, that one, because it's like, I was like, oh, it doesn't bother me in Burnout, but because I don't feel like Burnout's about being a person, but in Elite Dangerous, you're like interacting with other people. There's like an economy. There's like other
okay.
players. There's like all sorts of stuff going on. Like you're a pilot. You're supposed to be a pilot. You have hands. You see hands in front of you that are pushing the controls and stuff. But I don't know, the lack of variety, the fact that I never have to like get up and do anything other than fly my spaceship doesn't really ground me.
So the world of the game is asking you to interact as a person, as like making
Mhm.
decisions or like interacting with the world, but your personal experience with it is that you're basically just a ship because that's all you can do.
Yeah, essentially. To be fair, I only played a little bit of it. I played like through the tutorial and a little bit more, and then I was like, hey, I don't want to be a spaceship, and so I haven't touched it since. So I don't know if it gets better.
I like it. Well, yeah, that's I mean that's a valid thought. I'll have to check out that game myself. So that's
Versus, like-
Elite Dangerous on Epic
Yeah.
Games, right?
Elite Dangerous. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my experience is also kind of an experience of frustration and rage when related to a game. This was mentioned in before, and as we said in the intro, we play what we want when we want. So I'm playing a lot of older games, and so when I say I'm playing Assassin's Creed, this is an Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Last time I talked about Odyssey. This is not that. This is Assassin's Creed 2. So I'm playing Assassin's Creed 2, and there's this section where I have to do a lot of platforming. And
Mhm.
platforming in Assassin's Creed games can be particularly frustrating because you have a lot of similar inputs of running, jumping, and climbing. And if you're off on, where you're pointing, or you press a button one too many times, you could end up jumping to your death, running into a wall, or, just completely messing up section. But anyway, this part's a bit for contrast. So I'm in this difficult platforming section. I keep failing. I'm getting a little frustrated, and I'm like, okay, this is a lesson in patience. I can get through this, and I can. I'm getting more and more frustrated, but I eventually get through it. Now, fast forward an hour or so, I'm in this other section where it's this timed mission where I have to save these 2 kids from being murdered. And during this part, there is also platforming, and there are also a bunch of guys who want to kill me. And the thing about the combat in Assassin's Creed 2 is it's not very fluid. It's not very intuitive. It's kind of button mashy and kind of not connecting. And so I prefer just assassinating guys. But then there's 12 guys who are coming up around me. Anyway, so it's a stressful situation. But I found myself really upset. Like, I was getting really angry. I was like cursing at the game. I was like wanting to destroy all these people around me and feeling unable to do so in the 2 minutes that it gave me. And I think it was kind of that connection to the story a little bit, where it's like, you guys have locked up kids. You're going to kill kids. Like, that's not okay. I got to get you guys. And the game was making it really difficult for me to do so. And so that was kind of my experience. Eventually I beat it, and to the game's credit, even though I was trying to be button mashy, I was like, oh, I also have these smoke bombs that can disorient these guys. So I drop a smoke bomb in the middle of like a dozen guys and then just stab them. And it was yeah, at the end of all that, it was pretty cathartic. But no, yeah, just that mix of emotions and the contrast of those 2 difficulties and how they kind of mix together, I thought was noteworthy.
Yeah.
The mix of...
I never use the smoke bombs in Assassin's Creed games, even though you're totally supposed to. I'm like, no, it's more interesting if I do it the other way. And then I always die.
Yeah. Well, again, the hacky combat just doesn't feel good to me. It feels so much better to just stealthily stab people in the back. So.
I mean, like, it is a game about assassinating people. It's not a game about assassinating people. It just has the word assassin in it.
Yeah. I mean, the older games a bit more so.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Play Hitman sometime. Oh, boy.
Oh, it should. Yeah, so that's our game experiences. And now we are going to move in to our main topic today. And again, this is a topic that whoever's hosting chooses what they want to talk about and then brings it to the other 2. And, we have kind of a spontaneous discussion and learning experience. And yeah, hopefully a fun time. So, kind of connected to the frustration I felt in that game and just some things I've been thinking about. And actually, you mentioned this, Zach, and talking about your game. But what I wanted to talk about today was the idea of player agency and the different ways that's implemented in games, when it's good, when it's bad, and just kind of our experience with that. So, like, a quick little definition I found of player agency is that it's basically the level at which a player is able to interact with and affect the game world and also make meaningful choices. And I think that this can kind of happen in 3 different areas. First, I think that agency that you have as a person with a controller and a dude on the screen, and how that level of interaction, is fluid and how that feels. Obviously, what you can interact with in a game and the changes you can make to the world around you. And then also agency in a narrative, and how that can change. So first off, with the mechanical side of things, when's an example in a game? Maybe we'll start with negative, because we're kind of rolling with that right now. Where you didn't feel very in control of the game, or you didn't feel like you had a lot of agency with, that mechanical side of things, with, trying to push the buttons or interact, and it doesn't seem to be working as well.
Just like the direct input of me trying to control a character or control a...
Yeah. We'll start with that area, with that input.
Let me think a sec.
I got one. I don't know if this is exactly the right thing, but I have a really hard time with QuickTime events.
Yeah.
You know, like something cinematic will be happening on the screen, and then these button prompts will pop up, and you'll have to either mash a button or just hit the right random button at just the right moment or something.
Hmm.
And the reason I do not, there's a little bit of like a technical thing. Like I'm getting old man disease at the age of 26, and it's just getting harder for me to like see the prompt and then get it at this anyway. But that's not really the main thing. The main thing that I'm talking about here is that it just never feels it kind of brings me out of the game every time that happens, because it doesn't feel like it's connected to what's actually happening on the screen, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, hooray, I defeated the demon. It's like, did you? No, actually, you just had these button prompts pop up, and then you hit them at just the right time. And like, you know, I know that in some sense that's what video games are, but but it's kind of, but it feels different than disjointed for me from the usual video game controls that you have. Because it kind of establishes these rules and these expectations. It's like, hey, if you push the A button, you know, you jump. So, you know, and so it has these like rules, and then you follow those rules. But then when a QuickTime thing happens, it's like, well, forget all that. This is completely separate, and we wanted to have a cool cinematic scene, but we couldn't
So
figure out how
now-
to do it mechanically. So yeah.
So now when you push the A button, you do a triple backflip and stab your sword through the basilisk's head, and you're like, well, I did that.
Yeah, well, and then that's another part of it that I don't like, is that I never know what I'm actually trying to do. Well, not never, but often I
actual
don't know what
choices.
the button's going to do when I push the button. So I'm not really making a choice. It's a non-choice. I think that's probably part of the reason why I don't like it.
It's like press A to progress story.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, now press B to progress. Now press Y.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So anyway,
no,
I hope that answers your question, Aaron. But
No,
that's what I was
absolutely.
thinking.
I think that's a perfect example, and I think that kind of highlights the different ways that a game, you know, also interacts with the player. That you have the kind of in-engine basic button commands and how that works, and then you have cinematic cutscenes, you know, that can show the world or progress the story in a way that's not usual, in the same interactability that the player has. And then there's kind of that in between with the QuickTime events. And you're saying that kind of muddles the two and doesn't really work, right?
I'm saying that I just don't like it. I think I'd rather just watch a cutscene.
Just have a cutscene.
Because I don't get choices here, and I don't even get a choice of which button to push or which direction to dodge. You know, it's like it's non-choices to me disguised as interactivity and choices, and it doesn't do anything for me.
They often catch you off guard too, because they're like in the middle of a cutscene. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
cutscene. Oh, this is cool. What's happening? And then it's like, hey, wait, press A, press A. What? Oh, I got crushed by something. You know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it interrupts gameplay too. The Shadow of Mordor games do this thing where you're about to die. Sometimes when you're about to die, it'll just like throw up this random button prompt as you're like, I don't know what they call it, but it's like your last chance to recover and get back on your feet or whatever. And it's a random button, and you have to like move the mouse in a certain way or the controller in a certain way to. It's like, well, that's not really. That was kind of took me off guard, and it's not part of the regular in-game mechanics. So it surprises me.
I haven't played that one. I've seen my brother play that a lot. What I will say about that one is it does seem that at least that idea of a QTE is consistent every time you're about to die.
That's true.
It always
that's not actually the worst offender.
That it's almost like you're about to die and you have this chance to save yourself, but it's kind of tricky, kind of a little obtuse, because we don't want to make it easy for you to just have this this save
Right. Yeah. No, probably shouldn't have even brought that one up. It's similar to it, but it's a different problem than what I was mentioning in the first place. So.
But no,
But
I think that's good, because I think there are different levels. I don't know if it's fair to just say all QTEs are just this same bad attempt at cinematic action play.
Yeah, I can think of
different levels of
ones
it
that have worked.
Interactive.
And
Yeah.
I think the issue I often have with them is just it's like inconsistent. Like when I really like having consistent controls. I like knowing that when I push the A button, I'm gonna jump the same way every time, which is something that and so it's like my body. Like if I try to jump and then I accidentally throw a punch in real life, I'm gonna be pretty thrown off. So my input doesn't give me the regular output. Like that trips me up. So I really like having consistent controls, me personally.
Sure.
Kind of across the board. Like this button is always interact, or this button is always jump. That's useful for me.
Sure. And if we could, move beyond the QTEs for a second and just talk about, kind of the way that a game simulates that movement. Because if you think about a video game, when you're playing a video game, if you actually moved like how you move as a person, I think it'd be a very boring and frustrating game. If I don't know, say you had to like move each leg at a time, or see like jump,
What do you
or
mean, like
like Octodad.
yeah, or yeah,
and
all
the
those
level
like
of injury you
physics-based.
sustain.
What was that?
I was just saying the level of injuries you would actually sustain as a person based on what you're used to in a game. There's this idea when we're jumping into a game world that it's going to be kind of a larger than life experience, or that we're kind of going to be to cheat a little bit than how we would expect to do in real life.
I think it's I think that often is the. I don't want to cut you off if you're in the middle of a thought. You can go ahead and finish.
No, yeah, that's great.
But and so like there's the idea that there's going to be like this heightened thing. I think it's also just focused. It's like this is a game about mechanically and thematically and narratively or whatever. One or two things, and so it all kind of works together to support that. So sometimes if you're playing a game, kind of like, I don't know, Octodad or one of those other like crazy ragdoll physics-based, trying to perform simple tasks, but you have to control all the fine motor stuff and everything.
Surgeon Simulator.
Surgeons. Yeah, that's a good one. Like I think if that's like what the game is about, then it can work. But if the game is Assassin's Creed or The Last of Us or whatever, then I don't think that. I think that game's about different things, and so I think that it's better that they just kind of made shorthand for the physical movement stuff by just doing like the joystick and thing. And does that make sense? I'm hoping that's pretty clear.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about the fidelity between kind of the player experience, or the expectation, and the reality of what the game presents that it's trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, like it's so you just like you use shorthand. You just okay. Well, we have this. This represents player movement, but it's not like actually running. And because we want to focus on thinking about these things, or shooting, or jumping, or decision making in some way. So.
Well, I have a thought on that. I think that like kind of in general, some things are just gonna. Yeah, like you're saying, there's going to be a focus, and other things are just going to kind of get swept off to the side because these things aren't important. And so, where some games will choose to focus on movement as something that's really important, something like Mirror's Edge, where you've got up and down and a grab button and all of these things, whereas something, that's a game about like vertical traversal and stuff, versus another game about movement like Death Stranding, where the triggers in this game, instead of jumping, are used to grab the right strap on your backpack or grab the left strap on your backpack, because it's more about balance. Like Death Stranding, like both of these are games about movement, but each with a different focus on movement. And so like even there you have so much variety in like what you can choose to focus on, what things you can simplify and what things you like really want to dig into and get the player to think about, I think.
Yeah.
Is that connecting? Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. You can't make a game about literally everything,
Yeah.
You have to pick what the game's going to be about, and then you have to focus in on that and try to make that make sense.
It's like, here's this open world fantasy RPG, but it's also got this like realistic simulation movement and real world consequences. And
you're gonna have to fight a dragon, but you're also gonna have to make sure you're walking in a straight line.
yeah, and if you fall more than 5 feet, you're seriously injured.
And don't forget to breathe.
Don't forget to push the breathe button.
Okay.
I mean, like
That's true. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, even in something like Red Dead Redemption 2, I remember playing that game and seeing the standard RPG things where it's like, okay, so I move around and got to keep track of my ammo and got to keep track of my money and how I use my resources. And then I remember get to a point, it's like, oh, you haven't eaten in a while, and so your health is starting to get really low, and your stamina, you're not going to be able to run as fast. And it's like, I didn't know how to eat in this game. Like, I didn't say it was a survival game. And it turns out that it wasn't too intrusive, but it was one of those elements where it's like, yeah, it wasn't really a necessary system for the type of game that it wanted to be. It just kind of added a nuisance, an extra resource, an extra management system.
See, I love those actually.
I actually
bring that
really
up in a future episode. Yeah.
I think I kind of get a kick out of those too. I mean, like, I think it can serve a different function, but like, all of a sudden you're thinking about that need. And like, I think like with Red Dead, that does capture at least some part of the cowboy experience, I guess, that they want you to think of is like, well, yeah, like there's still food concerns. Like part of this story they're trying to tell is like there's food concerns in this story. Like even if that's not a huge thing, I don't know. That
sure, yeah.
I haven't played the game, so
no, and I guess I misrepresented that a little bit. I'm not saying that idea is necessarily bad, but the effect that it had on the game, like it wasn't really. It just seemed kind of a tacked on thing. Like it wasn't really a concern. It's like, oh, you have to eat this many times in order. It was just kind of like I found myself just eating just to role play. It was like, oh, get up in the morning and gonna have my breakfast and gonna and go. But there was never really much of an additional survival element to the game that having the way that it's managed or the way that it's controlled really make a whole lot of sense. I don't know. Yeah, it's not bad, but that was just an example. I was thinking of maybe taking it I don't know, with what the rest of the game is, with what you expect it to be, adding something additional that isn't quite as integrated and kind of confuses things a little bit. But yeah, not bad. Real quick, just if you throw out what's a game that you feel like does this really well, that feel like what you expect and what you get and what you're able to control and how it feels, that all that just comes together.
Spider-Man. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. It makes you feel like Spider-Man. Yeah, no, that's an old joke. Oh gosh, nobody's gonna get that.
I mean, I will say that
people are still making that joke.
The most recent Spider-Man game does do that very well. But anyway,
yeah, no, that's where this is coming from.
I've got one, which I already mentioned, but Mirror's Edge. I love Mirror's Edge. I love the movement in Mirror's Edge. I really love that I always know exactly what's going to happen. The up button makes me go up. The down button makes me go down. The grab button grabs, etc. Like, and while there's a little bit of variation, I always know that if I always know what I'm going to get out of a situation.
Yeah.
So I really love the inputs in that game, which, I mean, if you're not familiar with it, sorry, I should specify, it's a parkour first-person free-running game.
It's
which
so
I
good.
think is awesome. It's a ton of fun. The first one, the second one's also got a lot of really fun movement. But the first one especially is, I think, really excellent in that regard. So yeah, that's that for me.
I have a more general one. I agree with you. I like Mirror's
Yeah.
Edge too, but I have a little more of a general one.
Sure.
I like it when you're playing shooters and then you pull the trigger on the controller to pull the trigger in the game. I just think that's so cool. It's like you're actually, I don't know, it just feels like that. It just feels so right. Like you shoot, you pull the trigger, and then, oh yeah, no, I'm going to pull an actual trigger in real life, and then it's going to shoot the gun. I think that's cool. There's a little subtle thing that makes it feel just a little bit more,
Yeah.
Real or immersive, or
As opposed to pressing the down button to pull a trigger, is a little different than pulling a trigger to pull a trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just like it. I don't know.
That's interesting. I mean, that makes me think of, those like arcade games where it's a first person shooter, but you're just holding a gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something a bit more immersive about that.
VR has a really fun time with this kind of stuff too, because a lot of the controllers are basically just, you move your hands and then your hands move the same way in the game.
Yeah.
So
it's so intuitive.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit, talking more about the idea of player agency. So we kind of talked about it from a mechanic spot, and I think we've even touched on that gameplay interaction as well and how you interact with the world. And so I want to move into the narrative idea, and the ability that you have as a player to, either affect the story or affect how things happen in the game. So what are some of your experiences with that kind of narrative agency in a game?
Well, my favorite example of having agency in a narrative is The Witcher 3. I love how you have the option to influence how the story turns out, both like on like a short-term basis, but also on a long-term basis. Like it remembers the choices you make, and then it's adapted to let the consequences play out. Several scenes or several play sessions, down the line and everything. I think it just feels so. I love it. It feels so good. And it just makes me think. I don't know. That game is just so good. We were talking about games having a focus. I think that one of the focuses of that game is just like evaluating the consequences of your actions, and it just like the consequences play out, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Like the knowledge that what you're doing now is gonna matter later, and not necessarily knowing how much it's gonna matter, but it will, because this game shows you from the get-go that it remembers the things that you're doing. And so, like,
without putting it in the top left corner.
Yeah, exactly. Without pulling a
And you might say that that's kind of a way that the game limits the agency a little bit. That there isn't a direct link between I'm going to do this action and it's going to cause this certain event. That there's a little bit of an unknown there, where it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna do this action. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but there's these other factors in this game. There's just from my own intuition on what I feel is the right thing to do at this moment, gonna make that choice. And so I think that the Witcher does that really well in taking that balance of the agency that the player has to control the narrative, and then also limiting that they're not, so that you're still affected by unknown variables in the world.
Yeah, it gives you freedom to choose, but it doesn't let you determine the consequences of your choices. Yeah. It tries to follow like a logical thing. And I like that, because that's kind of the way I feel real life goes. Like you can choose whatever you want, but if you jump off of a bridge, you're going to fall into the water, like So
Or whatever else is below.
or whatever's under the bridge. Yeah. So
Yeah, and you have games with a more black and white morality system, which again, like going back to Red Dead Redemption 2, like before you like do everything, you see kind of a a white hat or like a red hat, kind of what the effect would be.
Oh
That's
yeah.
cool. That's
You
funny.
and so I kind of was like, oh, well, I need to make sure I'm in the middle, so I'm not too good or not too bad. But like in reality, that's it's not like, oh, this thing's gonna make me more of a bad person. This thing's gonna make me more of a good person. And The Witcher 3 just takes it. It's like, no, you try to do your best, and sometimes things happen. And
Yeah. And even when things go wrong in that game, I still feel like, well, I did the best that I knew how to do with the information that I had at the time, and that's okay. Someone died. Oh no, I'll learn my lesson. Next time it'll be different, hopefully, because I'll have learned my lesson.
That's one of the few games where I've been able to make a terrible mistake, or not, or just make a decision that had consequences that were unpleasant. But I haven't like wanted to go back and reload my save and like, oh, I need to do that again, because it's like, no, I did the best I could, and like, and now these are just the natural consequences of that, and I don't feel like, I don't know, it feels so natural that like when a character that I care about dies or something, it's like, well, that happened, and I did my best, and that still happened, and that's just the way life is. Kind of, you don't actually have control over the big consequences of everything. So I found myself, the only time I ever like reloaded and said, wait, I want to try that again in that game was when I was jumping back to our first point, is when I said when I'd like pick a dialogue choice and Geralt, the main character, would say something a little different than I thought he was going to say. It's like, oh wait, I didn't mean to say that. Like that's when I found myself reloading, was when my direct input I felt wasn't getting represented accurately.
And I think that can be a problem with dialogue trees, that oftentimes it does kind of shorthand your response, but doesn't necessarily have the tone. And I think Witcher 3 does it better than a lot of others. But sometimes there's a thing you think you're going to say one thing and then you say something else.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think that can be kind of fun as well, because in real life, we often say things that we didn't mean to say, or have a certain effect, or come out the wrong way. Like,
come out of my mouth.
And but the Witcher 3 still has consequences for that, and I think it's kind of cool. And I think that the expectation that game establishes is that, look, this is a bleak, dangerous world, and you're just a part of it. And there's kind of chaos and terrible things happening around you. Sometimes you can make them better, but sometimes you might just make it worse, or you might have no effect. And so it kind of establishes that. It's not like it establishes a game. It's like, oh, your job is to clean up this world and make it better. And so every time you fail, it's a problem. And so even when you have like a negative consequence, like even when, oh, this seemingly innocent act or this well-meaning act caused this chain of terrible events to happen, this character died, or this town is in much worse situation, it still feels like that's part of almost what's supposed to happen, or what you expect, or kind of the way that things go in the world. And so it's not like there's a good or a bad ending. It's just like you're experiencing what the world is doing, what the game world is offering you in different ways based on your.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, I would like to revisit The Witcher in the future at some point in more detail and in more spoilers, because
we absolutely should.
Because there's some things I actually like. Yeah, because related to this, there's some things I think it does really amazingly, and then I think it also has some shortcomings that I'd love to discuss later. But I think in order to do that, we'd have to get really spoilery.
Absolutely,
I don't want to do that right now.
Again, we do take 1 week and we dive in depth into one game, and so I think we're all saying one of those weeks it's got to be Witcher 3.
Not, we can keep it to one.
And so kind of a negative example, I was thinking of that, and it seems like these games just encompass a lot of different things, but Assassin's Creed. So, and this was I'm going to talk about two different Assassin's Creed games, one that I was playing and one that I saw my brother playing. So I've been playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey. on the computer. And in general, it's a really fun game. I love exploring the world. I love interacting with things, and it does seem like you have a little bit of choice. But there was this one example where I was interacting with this character. I just completed a quest, and there was dialogue options. One had a sword next to it, so it was obviously like, if I choose this option, I will fight this person, and then the others didn't. And so I chose the non-violent approach and ended up fighting the guy anyway. And I died. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'll choose the other dialogue approach. Some little bit different dialogue, still ended up fighting the guy. I was like, okay, what if I just fight him straight off? He like laughs at you, same bit of dialogue, fight again in the same spot.
Stop telling me I have choices.
Yeah, exactly. It was this moment where, none of those choices I had to make seemed to affect the game at all.
Right.
Or affected that outcome, and it just kind of funneled into this spot. And so that seemed to be a thing. It's like, okay, if you want me to fight the guy, like, don't give me the option to.
I think that something. I don't think that necessarily. How do I say this? In that situation, I don't know exactly how that game presents that, but I think it kind of makes sense. It could make sense that no matter what you say, you're still going to fight this guy, and he might still have the same response. And so maybe in that instance, your choice is more important than the consequences. But like, because like if what you're doing, like, it's not
more
really,
like an internal struggle thing at that moment, maybe.
Yeah, it's how do I choose to handle this? Because I think even it's not like I'm going to choose the outcome. It's like, how do I choose to respond to this? Because like, if someone's going to try to kill you, like, you could choose to respond to that in a bunch of different ways, but maybe you just can't talk them down. Maybe you just can't.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm necessarily opposed to that idea. Now that's funny that it did the little sword thing. Next to the dialogue options.
I think that's the thing that it showed, because in the past there had been options where there was that sword option and then there were dialogue options, and I never ended up fighting that person. And then it was in this instance where it gave me that option, but then it just led to that anyway. And I think the thing that annoyed me more with that, rather than just that idea of an inevitable consequence, was the fact that each dialogue choice kind of led to the exact same line of dialogue from him in the exact same spot. And it was
that's frustrating.
And that your character didn't even, because I will say it was interesting because I asked him questions about certain things in the character's past, and you learn different information based on what you ask, but it doesn't really affect either how your character responds or how the other person responds. So I don't know. It's kind of more.
Yeah, I would find that frustrating as well.
But yeah, and I think that's an example, again, not a terrible thing, but I think where you can see that disconnect with what you are expecting to be able to influence and what the game actually allows you to do, and kind of the frustration when they don't quite come together.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. That example that you shared, it makes me think a lot.
But then there are games where you don't really have any choice in the narrative at all, and they could still be a good game.
Yeah, no, completely.
The Last of Us, I love. I adore that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Me
like
too.
you don't choose. It's like, oh well, I'm going to join the zombies, or
I know. I'm just going to stay here and not. Yeah.
Ellie's annoying me. I'm going to leave her behind, and go.
Yeah. But also the expectation from the beginning is you aren't going to have choices. We have written this story. And so again, I think it's like that experience and the expectation going into it. And how the game presents itself. If the game says you're going to have options and then pretends you have options and then doesn't actually give you options, that's a lot more frustrating than if the game never pretends you have options.
Right.
And I think we see that expectation shorthand a little bit in the style of gameplay as well. If we see, this is kind of a more linear action adventure game,
Mhm.
you know, we're not expecting that we're going to have a lot of agency in how the story goes, or, you know, a lot of choices we make.
Yeah.
But if it's this open world RPG where it's do what you want when you want, and then it's like, oh,
Mhm.
but it doesn't matter, you know, then then I think we're expecting to have a little bit more control that we don't receive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Makes sense with me.
there's there's this wonderful conversation about like what should a game be about, and I don't want to try to answer that right now or bring up that particular can of worms, but like um but but something that I think games can do more than any other medium, whether it's like a movie or a book or anything, is it puts you actually into the driver's seat of it. And so while I really enjoy games that I don't have a whole lot of control over, you know, like I'm playing A Night in the Woods right now, and there's not a ton of agency there, and I love it. And I played The Last of Us, and I love it. But I think that something that excites me so much about this particular medium is that like it has the potential to do that. And so to do what I'm saying is put the player in the driver's seat and decide for themselves what they're going to do and everything. So I really, really, really get excited about games that push that particular thing forward, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of those are actually my favorites. So that's why I like a lot of the simulation style strategy things where it's like, yeah, no, you have complete freedom. It's overwhelming, but you have it, you know. So
Yeah.
Yeah, they offer different experiences, you know.
they
It's
do,
like
yeah.
some games they just want to tell a really good story, and it's exciting
And that's
to be
great.
part of that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Still.
And yeah, then some games are kind of more of a game where it's, you know, testing your skill and testing your creativity and, you know,
Yeah.
what you can make happen.
Yeah. I mean, Minecraft, you know.
Exactly.
Minecraft. I will sing praises of Minecraft all day long.
I love
That
Minecraft.
game is just yeah, incredible.
Remember when
In that
Minecraft was
way.
a kid's game?
Yeah, when I was a
Anyway,
kid.
you were talking. Yeah,
But
when I
just
was a
like
kid.
no, I think like Minecraft kind of presents that like here is a game where you don't have goals or where you have goals where so much is just foisted onto the player. It's like here, make of this what you will. You have so much agency. You are absolutely in control of what happens here. And I think it's no book and no movie, no TV show could ever do what Minecraft could do, or even come close to that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just think that's incredible.
Although, if I was going to level a single criticism at Minecraft at this time, I think there should be more consequences because it's kind of like it's like, oh yeah, do whatever you want and it's fine. It doesn't matter if you do anything. You know, it's all fine.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, you can murder the entire village of NPCs, but and it doesn't matter.
They won't care. They'll get over it.
They'll get over it. Yeah.
Definitely. I think we've touched on consequences in the past. I think that, yeah, I think the idea of consequence and rewards in games is another fascinating topic that we could definitely dive into at another time. But yeah, in this discussion, about game agency, I think we see a lot of it has to do with the expectation and with the, you know, actual result as in a lot of games. And that, you know, it could be limited agency or completely open to do whatever you want agency, and you know, can still be effective. That was one final thing I wanted to bring up was, have you ever played a game where you feel like you had too much agency? And maybe that goes into the consequence thing, but like, was there a game where you're just like, I shouldn't be able to do this, but I can do
I think that's what it is for me. Like, I'm not really offended by the breadth of options ever. In fact, I always want more because I'm extreme, but I also get frustrated when it doesn't matter what I do, because I want consequences to play out. Like if I shoot somebody, I want everybody else in that guy's family to be upset at me. It makes sense. It makes for an interesting story. It makes for a compelling gameplay. It makes me think about my choices and stuff like that. But I don't know.
That's a great question. Too much agency.
Yeah.
Here's a kind of weird example of
Sure.
a kind of an answer to that question. Sometimes I'm playing a really narrative game that I know has some choices, and I'm more interested in seeing the narrative that they've written, and I don't want to mess it up by making the wrong choices. So
Ooh.
that is something that happens to me sometimes. Is I'm playing a game and I'm like, I just want to see how this story ends. I just want to see the happy ending. I'm not really here to challenge myself. I'm here to watch this story. And the game's mostly just watching the story, but you just have a few key decision points that make a difference. So
yeah.
which I think is kind of funny because I tend to really enjoy having choices. But if my expectation going into this is I'm going to enjoy this story and kind of interact with it a little bit, and poke some buttons, but more or less kind of be along for the ride. And then all of a sudden I'm influencing if this story has a happy ending, I'm a little overwhelmed. I'm like, oh wait, this is not what I signed up for.
It's like,
really
you don't like a game to blindside you, where it's like, oh yeah, this is either a walking sim or just kind of a linear action adventure, and then you get to the end and it's like, make your choice, who will live or die. It's like,
but it's kind of, yeah.
Why am I doing that?
Or yeah, or knowing that my choices will have consequences, if I eat the cheeseburger or if I eat waffles, that this is going to influence the end of the game or something, because there's some games where it's you make a decision now and it comes back to bite you later and it doesn't make sense. When the consequences don't match up with the choices, or something
that
kind of
frustrates me.
weird or unexpected happens, that's sometimes I get frustrated. So I guess it's kind of a messy, weird animal. Yeah. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And I think, that idea of consequence and how that expectation goes and how many choices have consequences, I think that's definitely something valuable to look at in the future. But I believe we're running up on time on this episode. But thanks for that discussion about agency in games, player agency. I think definitely got a lot to think about.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. That was fun.
Yeah. For sure. Made me think a lot.
Yeah, good discussion. It's just great to discuss these games, and as I hear your guys' thoughts and my own thoughts, things become more clear, and I have my own ideas, and so what a great medium.
Yeah,
for real.
Podcast. Okay, and thank you guys for listening to that discussion. If we ever have a community in the future, feel free to send your own thoughts on that. And now we get to the part of the show that we like to call Think of a Good Game, which is a reference to one of our own experiences with a rather bad game, but it's funny.
Keep that a mystery.
We're not telling you what it is.
If you can figure it out, you won't be able to. You don't have the agency to do that. Okay. But anyway, this is where we recommend a game for each other to play, or just that we've been playing that we think other people should try out. And so, Nick, what's a game that you want to recommend?
For sure. We Were Here is a cute little game. Cute is a creepy little game that I played with my brother while I was visiting recently. It's a co-op experience. It's pretty short. Premise is that you're two dudes or people. You're two people in a castle trapped in different parts of the castle, and you each have a walkie-talkie, and you have different information, and you have to solve puzzles that help the other person progress. So it's all about communicating with the other person. It's free on Steam. We were just like, hey, this is free. Let's try it out. and it's a really fun little experience. It's a lot of fun to communicate and try to like, you're sitting there going, all right, I see a snake and a bird, and the other person's like, hang on, let me grab this book about snakes and birds and tell you what I can learn about that. That's an example that I made up that doesn't actually happen, but it's fun, like asymmetrical. You have to communicate to solve these puzzles and stuff, and it's a fun little experience.
And so, is it pure like online interaction kind of game, or?
Yeah, it's it's co-op only. So you play with one other person, and you just are talking to each other through walkie-talkies the whole time.
Oh, nice!
It's
awesome.
Fun.
What's that one called again?
It's called We Were Here.
We Were Here. And you said that's free on Steam?
Yeah, at least it was a couple weeks ago.
Awesome. I'll check that out for sure.
Huh.
And
maybe
Zach,
two of you guys can play it together.
Your game.
My game is the one I mentioned at the beginning.
Night in the Woods.
I think it's great. Night in the Woods. It's so sincere. It's so relatable for anyone who's ever felt like, well, for me, I suppose, because I've felt sometimes a little that I wasn't growing up quite fast enough, or that I didn't quite have a handle on what I wanted to do with my life. It's great. It's kind of like a come to terms with that, and it's so sweet and so honest. It's just great. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I'll definitely check that. You said that's on Game Pass, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Game I've been playing. Honestly, I'm just thinking of one I haven't recommended yet, but the game Control.
Really?
Started playing that. That's a pretty crazy game. It'll depending on your system you're trying to run it on, it'll tax it a bit, but no, it's got some really interesting gameplay. A kind of a mixture of third-person gunfights along with kind of some telekinetic ability, and the way that resources are managed and that you learn about things. There's a lot of reading in the game, which is kind of interesting. You just come across different documents, and it gives you a little backstory on kind of the world you're in. But kind of an interesting game, and looks pretty cool. So that's Control. I think that's available on whatever platform you want to play it on.
Right on. That one won some awards last year, I think.
It did, yes. It was I believe it was up for and won several Game of the Year things.
Yeah, it's a pretty one from what I've seen.
It is, yes. I apparently I thought I had a graphics card on my computer that could handle ray tracing, but I didn't realize that I had to go into the settings of the graphic card and say I actually want to use it, and I want to update it and update it. So it was also Control also provided me an opportunity to learn more about my computer and dive into. But when it was working, it looks amazing. It's a very pretty game.
Right on.
Yeah, great. Those are our recommendations. Again, if ever we have people listening to this other than the three of us, send in your recommendations of games that you would like us to play, maybe you'd like us to talk about. But for now, that is our podcast. And one more thing. So at the beginning of each cycle of our reviews, we have 4 weeks. Like I said, 3 where we talk about a topic, and then 1 where we dive in deep to a game. In that first week, we talk about the game that we're going to be playing that month and that we're going to dive into. And I believe, Zach, it's your turn to talk about what that game will be.
Well, here's how it happened. I couldn't convince anybody to play Crusader Kings 3 with me. And I decided, hey, I'll use the excuse of this podcast to get you guys to play it with me so that I can talk to somebody about it. But anyway, so Crusader Kings 3, grand strategy, new grand strategy game from Paradox Interactive. I think it's my favorite strategy game that I've ever played. It's a blast. So Yeah.
and that is actually a game that came out this year, isn't it?
Just October, I think.
Look at that. We're almost
New
current,
game. Well, okay. Looking into
Yeah.
some new
depending
territory.
on when this episode comes out. Yeah.
It's overwhelming and vast and huge, and there's too many options, and I love it.
There's lots of consequences and choices and
Oh yeah,
agency.
That's great.
so much agency.
And the fun thing about this game, we started playing it just the other day, and
Yeah.
it's a game that we can all play together and that we can all
Mhm.
experience at the same time, which I think is
Yeah.
really fun. And I know we recorded some of the gameplay. Maybe we'll have that up at some point. But yeah, that'll be the game that we'll be discussing. And so come back in for week 4, and we'll do a dive in deep into Crusader Kings 3.
Woohoo!
Woohoo, indeed.
Alrighty, and that is our podcast. Catch us next week for some more game design topics, and hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful week.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.